changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. Don't wanna be a richer man. Changes.
Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time today to be here with me. As we walk through this presentation, what it will do is it will enable you to not only enhance your life professionally, but it's going to help you become a better parent, potentially a better partner, maybe a better spouse, and maybe even a better friend. So I look forward to sharing the journey with you, and I'm really excited. So as we dive into the pillars of resiliency, one of the things that I'm very fond of is sharing stories. And as we learn the world from very young, we form our resiliency factors. And part of who I am as an individual and part of who I am as a person formed very early on in my life as a young person. So when I think about my story and who I am and where I've come from, resilience is who I am. It's a part and it's woven into who I am. The story of Kait Dinunzio is a complex story, and I think everybody comes with a story. So when we talk about the pillars of resiliency, all of our resiliency factors start forming at birth. When we cry, does somebody pick us up and cuddle us? When we're wet, does somebody change us? When we fall, when we're learning to walk, does somebody pick us up and help us dust ourselves off and keep going? When we can't figure out a resolution with our sibling, do our parents get involved, or do they expect that we'll solve that for ourselves? In addition to those resiliency factors forming and being nourished and nurtured through from birth or on into your mid childhood, really, um, we see how our lifestyle factors influence things like our mental health and our resilience in a significant way. And so what I mean by that is that we have neurological changes and we have neurological differences in our brain if we choose to smoke versus not, versus using alcohol or not, whether we sleep well or not, right? So how we choose to live our lives, how we choose to spend our time, who we choose to spend our time with always influences those lifestyle and those mental health and resiliency factors. The other thing that's very important for us to remember is that each one of the pillars relies on the other. So if one begins to crumble, the others will begin to erode alongside it. And as we walk through the presentation, you're going to see where those pillars start to interact and intersect with each other. The best way for you to actually get a grip on these things and start to drive your resiliency factors or improve them is to really learn to master and understand the change curve. When you're going through change, when you're experiencing it, do you understand what you're feeling? Do you see what you're feeling? Are you capable of comprehending what you're feeling? Because depending on what happens to us in our early childhood, we may or may not be able to do that. Understanding how you're resistant to points within change is also very important. We have a lecture that we give or a workshop that we provide called the Resilient Leader. And in the Resilient Leader, we speak very holistically to the different resistance factors. So level 1, I don't understand it. Level 2, I don't like it. Level 3, I don't trust you. Self-disclose all the time. Level 2, change resistor constantly. But what's really great is that I know that about myself. And because I know that, what that means is I can go ahead and I can drive change for myself using my resiliency factors. So self-love, very important. So when we talk about the pillars of resiliency, there are 4 of them. So we have problem solving, empathy, emotional regulation, and self-confidence. Problem solving is what we classify as the simple process. But what's really not as simple about it is if you don't have critical thinking skills, or if you're focused on maybe some conflict that you're experiencing with somebody within the problem, identifying the problem becomes very difficult. Once you've identified your problem, the real problem, you're halfway to solving it because you automatically start generating solutions for yourself. If you're looking at this in terms of business, what you'll see is collaborating with different groups across an organization, cross-referencing different project plans. If you're thinking about solving a personal problem, something that's driving or holding you back, you have to look at other people who've done it that have been successful and say, boy, they've done that. I wonder how they did it. Start to ask questions, but don't reinvent the wheel. Right. And what we see oftentimes, particularly in large scale organizations, is you'll have different work groups solving the same problem in different ways. And if we just came together and evaluated our solutions together prior to execution, a lot of heartache would be solved. When you're done evaluating and implementing your solution and putting that into place, coming back and having kind of a look back or a lessons learned is a really important piece to this, because that enhances and continually improves your ability to solve problems. So when I facilitate these kinds of questions in person, I'll usually say, how many people have participated in the lessons learned? And about 80% of the hands go up, right? And then I'll say, well, how many of you actually saw a change in behavior, process, approach, or lived the exact same problems over and over again, right? And so what we in our business define as a lessons learned is when we actually learn a lesson from it and we change a behavior, a process, an outcome, or we change the future way we're going to approach something. If those things don't happen, all we've done is captured observations and put them in a SharePoint site, which is a really, really fantastic thing to do if people look there. But that's not always possible. Nor is it feasible to think that people are going to go hunt and peck for the lessons learned of your last project. So when it comes to problem solving, this is a very intricate and a very personal process, because I think that this is, of course, based off of how you've built your resiliency factors as you've come through childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood. So when you think about your problem solving process, think about what is it that you do really well and what is it that you don't do well. Oftentimes when I work with organizations, what we find is identifying the problem is often the most difficult piece for people to get to the real problem, because people tend to think that if they talk about the real issue as opposed to the topic, they're going to offend people. Well, it's probably likely, but what we also need to remember is nothing happens when you're offended. So when we think about our next pillar, it's empathy. And, this is the one where, if I'm facilitating a workshop, oftentimes I have a ukulele and I make people feel really uncomfortable because I come out and I start playing Kumbaya. And I had one time where I had a vice president, and he was an engineer. And if he could have turned inside out and into stardust and vanished, he would have been gone. He was so grossly uncomfortable. But that's not what empathy is. Empathy is when somebody has the ability to understand somebody else's point of view, to be mindful of somebody else's feelings, or to treat others with compassion and respect, fairness, even if they differ in any way, shape, or form from you, right? And so when you think about empathy and the purpose of empathy and why it is so important, it's a key piece to emotional intelligence, leadership, and a foundational piece in the pillars of resiliency. This is one of the ones where I find a lot of people struggle, is being able to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. And even more so now, because everybody in the world is feeling this enormous amount of stress, right? We think about the human as the Russian doll, right? So you've got this little person sitting on the inside, and then you have the layers of change that are going on at work because we can't work the way we normally did, or maybe we're being asked to work in the face of adversity or danger, right? When we think about our first responders, or we think about those essential workers, you think about a corrections officer in a jail, right? It's hard to look past what's going on for you and feel for other people if you're experiencing something and nobody else is having that compassion for you. Empathy is really important because it allows you to read people, and it gives you the ability to see and manage those power dynamics that could derail you, right? And I think that's the one unwritten rule of empathy. Everybody thinks that it's hugs and kittens. Everybody thinks that it's, I'm going to run around work and give people, a bouquet of flowers every time they turn a corner because I feel bad that, I pooped on their project. Well, that's not what it is. What it is it's you being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and understand their perspective. And it's a very, very valuable asset. And we work with a lot of leaders who lack in this area. And so what we do is we work with a number of different people in the organization to create a level of awareness of how potential impacts and change are trickling down and impacting others. So emotional regulation is a very interesting one. So we always say, we've got to disarm the amygdala, or the amygdala, depends where you live in the world. So emotional regulation is actually the way to respond properly to our feelings in different situations. So people with really well-developed emotional regulation can express their feelings appropriately in any circumstance or situation, and they know how to give and receive feedback. And this is a really, really tough one. I remember when I was first coming into my business and I was working with an operations leader, and he was a big fan of mine. And he ended up giving me some feedback in a meeting that was very difficult for me to receive. And it was in front of a whole bunch of my senior stakeholders. And so I was like, gosh, I thought he really liked me. And then my business coach said to me, well, did you take into consideration how it made him feel to have to give you that feedback? And that put a whole new perspective in it for me. Emotional regulation can really affect us in all of our lives. I mean, anybody who's a really sour person, you know that they're probably not really well liked. If somebody's not well liked, nobody's inviting them out for coffee. Nobody's saying, hey, let's get married and have kids. You know, and it's very unlikely that the grouchiest person in the room is also the healthiest person in the room. So when you think about your emotional regulation, think about improving those skills. Like for me, when I first started working in business, I'm not a hyper emotional person in terms of like going out and getting angry. But for example, if I was doing like negotiations for unions, or I was doing arbitration, or I was having a really difficult conversation with a client, or providing feedback to somebody, I get red and blotchy. And so what I would actually do, because this is a physiological response, I can't control that. Like I'm really warm right here, right now, you guys. It's probably the warmest I've been in this office in weeks. And that's because my heart is racing and all of these different things are happening, right? So we have to go in and learn how to control those responses and those reactions as best we can. As we go through this process, what it is it really is disarming the amygdala. We're looking at ways to calm ourselves down, and really think about what we're about to do. And so you'll see that I've got a little equation down there on the bottom of the screen. E plus R equals O. The event plus your reaction equals the outcome. And it's so unbelievably important that if there's one thing and one thing only that you take away from emotional regulation, if that's it, that's fantastic. Because what it does is it gives you pause to say, you know what, this event plus my reaction, that outcome is not what I want based off of how I'm feeling right now. We can truly predict our future and how we choose to move forward. Self-confidence is self-love. And people are really self-confident when they have strong and realistic beliefs in their abilities. They feel capable in their tasks and or their responsibilities, when they have good relationships with friends, family, and peers, and when they can see challenges as adversity and opportunity. And that's one of the things. So like if you think about even just in this circumstance right here, so if you have an erosion in self-confidence, what happens is your problem solving process at the front end probably starts to kind of crumble, because if you're not confident in what it is that you're trying to solve the problem, your ability to be confident in what it is that you're putting forward is going to be hampered. In terms of relationships and personal growth, it's very much the same thing. Taking the time to invest in yourself in this particular area is very important. After we get through some of the content sharing, I'm going to give you guys some tips and some tools to take away. We've created tools that are things that you can take with you along your journey, and of course, follow up with us for feedback and questions afterwards. I'm now going to talk to you a bit about competence, resiliency, and change. So how do we tie it all together in terms of how we manage it through change? And I think this is something that is a really compelling conversation right now because of where we are in the world. So this is the conscious competence model, and it's not something that I take credit for. It's not my model. I think it's something that has been around since like 1960s, perhaps. But it's really, really important in how we respond in the moment. And so when we look at this, we have unconscious incompetence. So this is, you just don't know what you don't know. Then we move to an area of conscious incompetence, where now you know what you don't know. And that is a very, very uncomfortable place for people to be. Because when we think about our polling, if your self-confidence is the first piece to go, when you experience a change, that's the first thing for you to lose. And so as you start to see the erosion of your self-confidence take place, what happens is all of those other pillars follow it. And that's not uncommon. And so when we look at conscious incompetence to conscious competence, that's the area where you start to get new information, you feel empowered, and you can use it in a clinical fashion. That means I've gone away, I've taken a 3-day course, they've given me a bunch of tools, I have my clipboard and my checklist, and I'm just going to check the list. And I'm going to make everybody feel grossly uncomfortable because I'm not going to be human about it. When I first moved from being kind of this, I don't really know what I was. I was a senior research associate, and I moved from that role into the change role in a very formal capacity. When I moved there, they put me through this like awesome apprenticeship, a year with the Big Four. I was doing a live project. I was doing all of these things. I had all of these tools, new language. I was like, yes, this is awesome. Okay. So I'm walking around with my clipboard, checking my checklist, and I'm just making everybody really uncomfortable. And I can remember we were going away to do kind of a galvanizing activity, team building, to bring all of our new senior leaders together and really start to build the team. So we did a start, stop, keep. So let's talk about the things we want each person to start doing. What do we want people to stop doing? And what do we want them to keep doing? And so everybody had a same colored pen, and we all went around and we wrote on everybody's flip charts what we wanted them to start, stop, and keep doing. And so then we had to go to our sheets afterwards and look. And so this is it's almost like a little mini informal 360-degree feedback session. And so I went over to my sheet and I was really excited because I'm like, I am going to get all starts and keeps. No one's going to tell me to stop doing anything because I am doing my job so well. And I went up to my page, and in the stop was stop being so clinical and start being Kait. Oh, oh, well, okay. And so it was one of my biggest champions, my business manager, who said to me, you know, you've got all this really great knowledge and it's fantastic, but we just want you back. You're in this role. The investment was made with you because of the fact that you're just so great with people. Could you please just stop being so clinical? Oh, okay. So clinical people are kind of annoying, right? The conscious competence people are they're awkward and they're weird. And so what we want to do is we want to move people to unconscious competence as quickly as possible. Because once we're there, you're a master at exercising your knowledge and you can just do it without thinking. And that's where I live a lot of the time until I start learning again. And I strongly encourage everybody to always be on a continuous learning journey because this is a really big world and there is a ton that can be offered. So when we think about laying that model over or under this model, this is where it gets real. So you think about those 4 pillars of resiliency. We've got our problem solving, our empathy, our emotional regulation, and our self-confidence. Then we have our conscious competence model. Then we start to go through change. So I would imagine that most of the people on this call have either seen or experienced or participated and have seen this model somewhere. So when we look at how the change curve works, it starts with the change being instigated, and then we go into shock and loss. Shock and loss are, holy crap, I can't believe this is happening. Oh my goodness, I feel like I've lost absolutely everything. When that actually comes about and it changes, it comes down into anger. And anger as a practitioner for me, I love anger. And people really think that's weird when I say that, but I do. I absolutely love anger. And the reason why is because people feel like they can write nasty little text messages, they can hammer out these little snotogram emails, and they can just stomp their feet because gosh darn, I'm mad. And oh, I can see mad. So if I can see mad, that means I can help mad. And what that means is we're going to take mad, we're going to drag it down into the bottom of the curve because where we come from when we're angry is we go from, you know, I'm really upset. This is not going to work. This is complete baloney. I hate this change. And then we come into the hanging and bargaining point and depression and despair. And that area is where a lot of people spend time. And I would bet to wager that there are a number of people that each one of you can think of right now who are experiencing that in their everyday world, whether we think about layoffs, whether we think about our favorite coffee shop not open, whether we think about the fact that we have to wear a mask everywhere we go. The world is not the same. And there are a lot of people who are sitting at the bottom of the curve and they're languishing. And they're languishing because they don't know how to move themselves out of there. So when we think about that, this is an area where we start to drive efforts and address doubt, where we start to rebuild morale and provide solutions. So this is an area where if you were to look about how you want to engage your resiliency factors, anywhere from anger to depression and despair becomes a problem-solving activity. One where you can reach out to other people, where you can speak to experts, where you can read books, where you can find tons of information online. But finding that spark to give you a little bit of a boost to move yourself forward in a different way is the best bet, the best thing that you can do. As a business leader, if you're thinking about, holy smokes, you know, I'm implementing a huge software and the software is, the implementation's not going very well and you're sitting down in that part of the curve, well, it becomes very uncomfortable very, very quickly. And you as a leader have you have a responsibility to pull people out of that. When you come out of that, we come into early engagement. And early engagement, in my opinion, is the worst, most uncomfortable possible spot that you could be on the change curve. I will take anger any day over early engagement. And the reason that is because early engagement makes us feel uncomfortable, particularly if we're leading a change. If you are experiencing a change, it's a little different because you're experiencing it and you're going, oh, well, Kait forgot to cross her T and dot her I on that statement of work or on that SOP or that work practice. And I, as Kait driving the change, is going to look at that and go, Holy guacamole, that is making me feel very uncomfortable. We're doing this huge change program, and that's what you picked up on. But what it is it's people trying to put their fingerprints on the change for them to actually take it, digest it, and move forward into that area of buy-in. So when you get to that space, what you want to do is you want to create momentum and set new short-term goals. And you want to recognize success and celebrate new behaviors as people go through. This is a very important piece, particularly in the realm of, training and coaching people through times where there's a lot of start and stop. So recognizing these areas on the change curve and marrying them over top of your resiliency factors inherently will give you the ability to start to emerge through your change. What's really important to note about the change curve is that it is not just a linear process. You can go forward and you can come back. For example, as a leader, if you're leading a very large scale change, you can be in early engagement and your team can be in anger, and then you can come back to anger with your team very easily, right? The other thing to note is you cannot skip steps. Some of you might be sitting there going, well, gosh,
Hmm.
I don't feel like I'm ever angry when there's a change. But the fact of the matter is that you cannot skip the steps. What you can do is glean over them based off of how easy and how well resilient you actually are. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about self-improvement, where we go from here. So we've now talked about the framework. We've talked about problem solving, empathy, emotional regulation, and self-confidence. We've talked about our conscious competence model, and we've also talked about our change curve. So now, how do you become better at getting yourself over the hump in terms of honing in and making those resiliency factors better? So thinking about empathy, right? So you plus me equals we. So tune in. So put the phone down, close the inbox. 56% of our conversation is body language. So watch yours and theirs. Listen to understand, not to respond. I shared this with a client in New Jersey, of all places, and he has a really nice thick Jersey accent, and he says to me, how am I supposed to have a conversation with you if I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say when you say what you're saying to me? And I said, well, I don't know, maybe if you listened and let me finish what I was saying, you'd have an appropriate response. Make eye contact. Don't formulate those solutions while other people are talking, and don't use filler words while someone is talking, right? Use your body language to show and recognize acknowledgement. I remember I was working with a woman in North Carolina, and I would be talking to her, and she would be going, like, she would be trying to predict what I was saying to her. So she'd be going, uh-huh, yeah, oh, uh-huh. And I'm like, stop, what are you, a goldfish? Enough, right? And so what we want to do is we always want to just be present with people. This is empathy. If you don't, like, it's like when you walk through the grocery store lineup. If you ask the woman at the cash register or the man at the cash register, their opinion of the day or how they are, and you don't actually care, don't ask them. Like, empathy is a practice. It's something that we do, and it's something that people feel when they're with you, when you're in their presence. Ask questions. So before jumping to conclusions, ask questions to start to dive into concerns, and use open-ended questioning. Anything that can be answered with a yes or a no is probably not a really good question in terms of you showing some empathy, right? And I think about that in terms of, even with these wonderful digital little boxes that we carry in our hands, when somebody walks up to us and we're having a conversation on here, and somebody else wants us to be present with them, like 3-second eye contact doesn't count, guys. Manage your emotions and your responses. So 37% is our tone of voice. So if you think about that, anybody who has a 14-year-old daughter completely understands what I'm saying, because that tone of voice tells you everything you need to know. Because remember, your emotions are contagious. Emotional regulation. So what I've done is I've created a little table exactly like the former to give you some insights here. So self-awareness, determine what's going on for you in the moment. So when we think about gaining control of that amygdala before it allows us to lose control, it's really creating self-awareness and understanding what's going on for you. Ask yourself what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. Name it, right? And so you think about that and it's like, gosh, I feel very angry because X. And for you to have that personal dialogue and that personal conversation with yourself, there's no harm, no foul. I mean, everybody has a notebook, write something down, because listen, guys, you got to feel it to heal it. Mindful awareness, so disarming that amygdala or the amygdala, focus on something something else. So what we do is, particularly for me, I do a lot of deep breathing. The other one that I recommend people do is a body scan. So what a body scan is thinking and sitting and just being present with yourself and think to yourself, how do my toes feel? What do my ankles feel like? How are my shins? Do I have that little pulse in my calves? How do my knees feel? Because if we focus on the physical, we can disarm the mental. Internal dialogue. We are what we say we are. And this is something we talk about in bodybuilding quite often, is our internal dialogue really ratifies our spirit to move forward and to do the things that are very uncomfortable for us. We have to turn the messaging from the negative to understanding what you need to solve the problem that you're experiencing. And so if you think about that, say you're having a really bad day and, I go and I write a report for Tianis and Tianis is like, Kait, what are you doing? This was the worst report ever. To turn it around, instead of, man, Tianis hates me and everything I do, it's, man, I really screwed that up and I can understand why Tianis is feeling upset with me. I wonder how I can fix this. Right. And then from going, how can I fix this? I start to say to myself, what was the real problem? Did I miss the mark? Did I not get the content right? Did I write it in a way that was not beneficial for Tianis and what it was that he was trying to achieve? And here we go. Empathy. In amongst emotional regulation is to feel empathy. So if you feel like you're going to lose it, or maybe you're feeling very emotional in one way or another, put yourself into a different scenario. How would you support a friend or a colleague through the situation? What advice would you give them? And if you can take yourself away from your immediate response, that event plus your reaction. So the event has happened, your R is now fully in your control at this point. So if you've got that R, what does that R look like if it were somebody else and you were going to give them the benefit of the doubt and that support? And self-love. I think this is something that we just simply do not talk about enough. And self-love is where you take some time for yourself each day. These are things where you can do gratitude journaling. You can read, go to the gym, take a walk, text and visit, scroll Instagram, whatever that looks like for you, whatever self-love is. This feeds into your self-confidence and it's going to help you see that you're worth the effort. So tips to encourage good emotional regulation and giving and receiving feedback. I got to be honest with you guys, this little comic has survived 10 years. So it says, I like your hat, your face is ugly, but your top is nice. And, when we think about how we give and receive feedback, active listening, again, listening to understand, not to respond, using your body language. So when you're communicating your understanding, someone's giving you feedback. Make eye contact, you avoid using that filler language again. And again, question for clarification. So using empathy as well. So again, coming in, and when you think about somebody coming to give you feedback, think about that person and what it makes them feel like to have that conversation with you. Because more often than not, in good faith, particularly in business, people aren't coming to you to try and punch you in the face and blacken your eyes. They're coming to you because they have a purposeful reason to have the conversation with you. So I think that is one of the things where a lot of people are not very good. And so I think back to that first time when I received really hard feedback and it was very uncomfortable for me. I went into that and I came back on the Monday, and after the weekend I'd had some time to think about it. I worked with my mentor and I came back and it was just like, gosh, I went and I found that manager. I went to him and he was getting into an elevator. And it was between meetings kind of thing. And I saw him and I said, hey, can I talk to you real quick? And he said, no, I've got to go. I said, this won't take long. And he said, oh, okay. So he let his elevator go and he looked at me and he said, what can I do for you? And I said, I just want to thank you. And I put my hand out and I shook his hand because we were allowed to do that back then. And I said to him, I just wanted to thank you because that feedback couldn't have been easy for you to give me, because he was a fan of Kait, right? So it wasn't about the fact that he was trying to, rain on my parade, but he was trying to help me become better. And because of the feedback that he gave me, I think 14 years ago, I am better. So self-confidence, learn to accept failure. So failure is really a part of progress, and you have to be able to fail to set your new benchmark. So you're human, you're going to make mistakes, and we all do. The only true and absolute failure is when we fail to learn from our mistakes. And so when you think about that, you think about that lessons learned, right? Did we learn from it, or was it just a lessons captured? And I love our little thing down there. The early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. Self-confidence. So after you make decisions, commit to them. What we find is that people who are strong, self-confident people, they communicate and they share their ideas with a sense of belief in what they're doing. So I'm going to give you conviction. I'm going to be in your face. I'm going to tell you guys, this, drink my Kool-Aid, right? It's very colorful and it's tasty. But don't waffle. Go confidently in the direction you've set for yourself and be someone that others can look up to. Be the leader that you need in your world. And if you think about that, if you've used proper problem solving, if you've gone in and you've done some critical thinking, if you've worked with other people and you've sought input from others and you're looking to understand what other people are doing, you should be okay, right? I'm a big fan of fake it till you make it if you don't have the courage on the outside. And so when we look at that courage on the outside, your personal energy says so much about you. And surely you can see that I have a very clear lack of confidence. And, I'm not a very courageous individual at all, or anything of that nature. But if you show a lack of courage in yourself, you're going to damage your own self perception. And remember, we are what we say we are. And so if you need extra support, this is the opportunity for you to reach out to find opportunities, right? And how many people, when you're going through that conscious incompetence to conscious competence, go out and go through and pick up some new tips and ideas, right? And just be better.
I think on that note, again, I cannot thank everyone enough, guys. This is, we were overwhelmed. I think it was awesome, the content that Kait shared. And every month we aim to do one. So please be on the lookout with, for our messages and our events that we're planning. And we'll also try and engage with our following. If you're not following us yet on LinkedIn, do that, because we always like to interact and stay abreast, right? We would like to find out what's top of mind for people out there from a personal, from a professional point of view. And we might have some content that we can share and strike up a conversation about. But on that note, I would like to thank everyone for their time and hope to speak and physically see you all soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.
Change